Most people think the United States and Iran are enemies waiting for one big war. They're wrong, because that war already started decades ago. It just doesn't look like war. It's fought with cyber weapons, covert operations, and proxy armies. It did not start in 1979. The real fracture traces to a CIA operation most Americans never heard of, one still shaping oil prices, cybersecurity, and the Middle East's future. On August 19, 1953, the streets of Tehran erupted. 2 years earlier, Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, nationalized the country's oil industry, stripping control from the British-owned Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. Britain retaliated with a total naval embargo, crippling the Iranian economy and triggering a severe balance of payments crisis. To resolve the standoff, the CIA teamed up with British intelligence under the codename Operation Ajax, merging with London's planned Operation Boot. Orchestrated on the ground by CIA officer Kermit Roosevelt Jr., the operation distributed hundreds of thousands of dollars to mobilize paid rioters, bribe military officers, and plant hostile propaganda in local newspapers to destabilize the government. Within days, Mossadegh was arrested, and the exiled monarch, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, returned to absolute power. This intervention relied on deniable tactics rather than open military force. While Washington secured a friendly regime and stable oil flows, the operation left a permanent scar. For millions of Iranians, the coup proved that Western powers would never tolerate domestic sovereignty. The Shah was back on his throne, but the quiet rage of 1953 was already building toward an explosion that would rewrite global politics. In February 1979, the Shah fled into exile. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini returned to establish an Islamic republic, casting the United States as the Great Satan and the ultimate threat to Iranian independence. The final break came on November 4, 1979, when Iranian students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. For 444 days, 52 Americans were held hostage, paraded before global television cameras. This crisis paralyzed American foreign policy and shattered formal diplomatic relations. In Washington, the ordeal became a lasting trauma, demonstrating the limits of military and diplomatic leverage. In Tehran, the occupied compound stood as a supreme symbol of resistance against foreign control. This single event generated two entirely incompatible historical memories. What Washington experienced as an illegal assault on diplomatic immunity, Tehran defended as a necessary preemptive shield against another Western coup. Hostility hardened from a temporary revolutionary emotion into a permanent framework for state strategy. A direct military clash between the United States and Iran carries intolerable costs. A conventional war would not stay contained. It would immediately ignite the wider Middle East, pulling in regional allies and choking global energy flows through the Strait of Hormuz. Because the price of open combat is too high, both nations operate as rational actors. They shift their struggle into the gray zone, the space between peace and total war. Rather than launching armies, they deploy sanctions, cyber tools, and proxy forces. What looks to the public like a tense standoff is, to strategists, a continuous sequence of small, quiet wars. In 2010, the boundaries of global conflict shifted without a single shot being fired. A highly sophisticated digital worm, later known as Stuxnet, bypassed the air-gapped physical security of Iran's Natanz enrichment facility. Developed as part of a joint covert effort codenamed Operation Olympic Games, the malware specifically targeted Siemens industrial control systems. Instead of stealing classified data, it hijacked the centrifuges refining uranium. It forced them to spin at dangerous, uncontrolled speeds while transmitting false, normal operating reports to monitoring screens. Over 1,000 centrifuges tore themselves apart. The reason this matters is that for the first time, a line of computer code produced physical destruction, achieving the results of an airstrike without the political fallout of crossing sovereign airspace. But this digital strike did not halt Iran's program. Instead, it drove the conflict into new territory. Rather than backing down, Tehran rapidly expanded its own offensive capabilities, establishing specialized intelligence units like the Shahid Kaveh cyber group. In the years that followed, Iranian-linked operators launched retaliatory campaigns against Western targets, ranging from American financial institutions to municipal water systems. In this digital arena, identifying the true origin of an attack remains notoriously difficult. This persistent ambiguity is precisely what makes cyber tools attractive to both sides. It offers a way to inflict real damage, test adversary defenses, and signal strategic resolve, all while maintaining just enough plausible deniability to prevent the conflict from spilling over into an open, conventional war. Under Title 50, the CIA's Directorate of Operations coordinates American covert programs. On the other side, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, its elite Quds force, and the Ministry of Intelligence manage Tehran's asymmetric operations. This is a war of networks, not standing armies. Because Iran cannot match the conventional military power of the United States, it projects force through regional partners. In Lebanon, Iran funds and arms Hezbollah, placing a heavily armed deterrent on Israel's border. In Iraq and Syria, the Quds Force guides Shiite militias within the Popular Mobilization Forces to target American military outposts like Al-Tanf and Al-Assad Air Base. In Yemen, Tehran equips Houthi rebels with advanced anti-ship missiles and attack drones, turning a localized civil war into a threat to global maritime trade. These regional factions do not act alone. They function as nodes in a unified strategic web. To counter this, Washington relies on intelligence sharing and defense partnerships with regional allies, transforming local political struggles into proxy battlegrounds for the larger U.S.-Iran rivalry. Within government offices in Washington, policymakers are preparing their most destructive non-kinetic weapon yet, a global siege designed to starve Tehran's network of the funds that keep it alive. In November 2018, the U.S. Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control blacklisted over 700 entities, targeting Iran's banking sector, international trade, and oil exports. By April 2026, Washington expanded these measures to block Iran's shadow fleet of oil tankers. These barriers inflict severe domestic pain, yet they do not force a change in Tehran's security strategy. Instead, Iran adapts. To bypass the restrictions, the regime builds alternative trade networks with partners like China and Russia, while relying on illicit financial networks to move cash. The nuclear program remains the central focus for major diplomatic standoffs. Each cycle follows a predictable path. Economic pressure leads to negotiations, followed by short-lived agreements and eventually renewed violations and escalating tension. This continuous economic warfare serves as a permanent arena where both sides contest power without crossing the threshold into open battlefield combat. Roughly 1/5 of globally traded oil passes through a single maritime choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow corridor makes the rivalry between the USA and Iran a matter of global economic survival. A minor disruption here instantly inflates shipping costs, drives up energy prices, and triggers investor panic worldwide. Facing this volatile environment, Gulf Arab states must constantly balance their defense partnerships with Washington against the practical necessity of maintaining regional stability. Meanwhile, Israel views Iran's regional military footprint as an immediate, active security threat, creating a permanent flashpoint for a wider conventional war. This conflict remains largely invisible because its primary weapons leave few immediate footprints. Classified intelligence files hide the daily maneuvers of both Washington and Tehran. In the digital arena, cyber strikes arrive as isolated, disputed glitches, allowing both sides to contest the facts without clear battle lines. Economic sanctions build pressure over years, quietly altering lives far from news cameras. While headlines spotlight rare physical attacks, they overlook the continuous economic, cyber, and proxy campaign. This enduring rivalry stands as the ultimate model of 21st-century hybrid warfare, where influence and silent pressure replace open battlefields. Subscribe to watch our future geopolitical documentaries. This shadow struggle is the definitive blueprint for 21st century hybrid warfare. As physical and digital borders blur, the next global conflict won't be declared. It will simply be waged in the dark. Subscribe for more deep dives into global geopolitics.